All right, very good. Well, thank you for all that are joining us. I have just 1 minute after 2, so we'll go ahead and get started. I know we'll have some other folks joining us. Thank you all for joining us today for the DSM Forward Ask the Experts. This is the first in our series of the Ask the Expert webinars. And we're really, really pleased today to have such a dynamic lineup of great industry leaders in the HR business function profession. The DSM Forward is a compilation of playbooks that have been put together devoted to helping businesses and industries prepare for the next steps related to the economic recovery from COVID-19. The industry playbooks are on the partnership's website, and we will be sharing that site with all of you so you can access those. In addition to the various industry clusters, there are also 6 business function playbooks as well. And so today is our first to have an opportunity to visit with this esteemed panel of DSM area HR leaders to hear their perspective as we talk about the reintegration and reopening of many of our businesses. I will begin by introducing our experts, and you see their names of our panelists up on the screen. I will start by asking a few questions, but this is truly the Ask the Experts. So we do hope that those of you participating on this call will share your questions as well. You can do that through the chat function, and then I will monitor those and share those with our panelists and ask for their response. So thank you again for joining us. So with us today, we have Beth Niggett, who is Executive Vice President and Chief People Officer with EMC Insurance Companies. And I'm also very pleased that Beth is chair this year of the Talent Development Board with the partnership. So thank you, Beth, for all you do for us. Marcy Chickering, Executive Vice President, Chief Human Resource Officer for Wellmark Inc. And Marcy also serves on the Talent Development Board. We have Ryan Sawyer, who is Vice President of Human Resources for Mid-American Energy Company. Ryan, thank you so much for being with us today. And Amanda Young, Senior Vice President, Chief Human Resource Officer with Bankers Trust. So again, we have this great opportunity to hear from 4 of our area key leaders in the business function of human resources and talent development. So thank you all for being with us today. I'm going to start with the first question. What factors did you consider when developing your integration or your return to work plan? And Beth, we're going to start with you.
Sure, thank you, Mary. And I do want to say thank you to the work of the partnership. You, Mary, and the entire team at the partnership have been an incredible resource during this very interesting and challenging time from an HR perspective, from a business perspective. So just great kudos to you and the entire partnership team for just being a wealth of information that is really helping to guide our businesses and I think our communities through kind of uncharted waters here. And with that, even just getting into what EMC has taken a look at, you know, one thing I want to say is kind of in the spirit of what the partnership has done with collaboration, there is a tremendous amount of sharing that goes on within the human resources area. I know that I've been in contact through various emails with many of the folks on this panel today. So there is such a great collaborative spirit. And one of the things that we're taking a look at is what are others within the community doing in this regard. And I think it's been very apparent that one of the things that's been guiding all of us is the health and safety of our team members, first and foremost, because we do want to make sure that we are taking a look at what is in the best interest of our team members, their families, and the communities in which we live and work. That's been our guiding principle. And then along with that, what is the state of play with respect to our local geographical area, the CDC, the Iowa Department of Public Health. We've got various offices in different states. So we're taking a look at those other states and those geographic locations as well in terms of what are the guiding regulations, constraints, if there are any that are being put into place. How do we navigate all of that? And then as well as the practical endpoint of what does this look like upon reintegration? What does our workspace look like? What do we need to do, if anything, from this social distancing perspective? So all of those various factors going into how does reintegration work? And quite honestly, we want to take a very cautious approach, because one of our first questions has been, if we are able to serve the needs of our customers and also make sure that we're keeping our team members safe, is working from home something that we can be doing for a longer duration of time? Because we also want to be forward looking in terms of if there is a second wave, if there's some point in time that we need to pivot and come back to a more holistic work from home. How do we do that, and how do we balance that in terms of reintegration, getting people comfortable going back into a physical office space, and then if we need to pivot to go back to a work from home, what might that look like? And so where EMC is right now, our short answer is at July 1 is when we're going to assess the state of play and then take a look at how we might reintegrate a small portion of team members to back to a physical location. But we're also taking a look at if we can continue to service the needs of our stakeholders, being in the insurance industry, with our independent agents and our policyholders, really taking more of a long-term look at making sure we keep this work from home strategy in place again, with the health and safety needs of our team members first. And with that, I'll turn it over. I think Marcy's going to be up next to offer some insight.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks, Mary. Thanks for having us. And I would echo so much, if not everything, that Beth is sharing, has shared with all of you. The Greater Des Moines Partnership has been fantastic in supporting all of us, and appreciate the opportunity to encourage this dialogue and the collaboration. So thank you, Mary. And our criteria at Wellmark is a lot of what Beth just went through. We've communicated with our employees. The top two criteria is the safety of our employees and no disruption to our stakeholders. Beyond that, we are looking at the physical environment, how to make sure that employees do feel safe when they come back. Some changes that we're making to our work environment, thinking about the vulnerable definition, not just for our employees, but for our employees' households. And also just the difference in our states, where Iowa is at, where South Dakota is at, as well as each of our locations. So it feels like every day there's new information, whether that's from the CDC or the Iowa Department of Public Health, or the governor. And so we're just trying to stay very mindful of that and watch that. And as Beth said, as long as our employees are productive, which they are, we have 98% of our employees at home right now. And as long as they remain productive, our focus is more of the long term of not rushing to bring them back into the office. And with that, I think I will turn it over to Ryan.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So at Mid-American, it's much of the similar commentary that's already been mentioned. Safety for our organization is paramount throughout this, as well as our ability to continue to serve our customers. And as an essential service provider, we've continued to maintain roughly 50 to 60% of our employees who are showing up either in the office or out in the field, each and every day throughout this pandemic, continuing to get the work done and meet the needs of our customers. And so, we have very much operated on as much as you can during this pandemic, and the mentality of it's business as usual. And for other employees who, for one reason or another are able to do their jobs remotely, we did take steps to remove them from the workplace, but we've continued to have those employees rotate in and out of our workplaces throughout the pandemic. And where we're at right now, we actually announced earlier this week an intent to bring 100% of our employees back working on site, with the exception of a small number of employees who have certain health conditions or may have family members that place them in higher risk categories, beginning the week of June 1. So we're approaching that very quickly. There's a lot of planning and other activities that we're looking to implement to make sure that when our employees do enter the workplace in larger concentrations, that we have social distancing measures in place, that we have appropriate cleaning mechanisms, and that we have policies and procedures both to protect the short-term and long-term health of those employees. And then finally, as others have mentioned, we're continuing to monitor changes both nationally as well as locally in terms of number of cases, and certainly any sort of cases within our workplace, and are prepared to react appropriately. So with that, let me turn it over to Amanda.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. So the thing about being on last on a panel like this with these great experts that I'm surrounded by is there's not much to add when you get to answering the question last, but I would echo the sentiments that everyone said about the partnership, and am thankful to be surrounded by such a good HR community and a business community. And then for Bankers Trust, I've always said it this way: this isn't a race we want to win as far as how quickly we can get back to work. So we want to do this to the workplace. We're already working, but we want to do this in a very thoughtful way. So first and foremost, employee and customer safety, of course, but other considerations we are looking at are, what does the return to work feel like from a cultural perspective, from a team functionality perspective, from an individual productivity perspective, and where able, managers are gauging employee preference. So we're doing a 3-tiered phased return to work, and so we're looking at things and having conversations, especially where there are childcare or healthcare concerns in play, to make sure that we make those decisions accordingly. And like every other organization that's on this panel, and I would assume most in the Des Moines community, we're looking for state, local, and federal guidance, as well as guidance from the CDC, Iowa Department of Health, World Health Organization, to make sure that we're making the decisions in the best interest of our organization, and in a way that we can look back on and be proud of. They're not uncomplicated decisions, and they don't come without their complexity and diverse opinions across the workforce, but we are doing the best things that we think we can to keep those things that I mentioned key and upfront in focus.
Very good. Thank you all. And Amanda, so we won't make you last this time. We'll
thanks, Mary. Did I guilt you into that?
Communication and how we're all communicating with our team members has been so critically important always, but particularly during this time. So could you share with us just a little bit about how have you or how will you communicate your reintegration plans to your employees, team members?
Absolutely. So this panel happens to be very timely because we are introducing to our managers, in fact, this afternoon, our return to the workplace plan, and then following that at the beginning of next week to our employees. And so our managers, through guidance, will have the ability to address their individual team-specific needs, make some of those workforce decisions on what employees will be coming back in which tier. So we'll continue and have done a comprehensive approach of email, intranet, WebEx to communicate to our employees, virtual meetings. I think each of our employees have probably learned about 4 to 5 different applications, I know I have, on ways to connect in this more remote environment. But we've been doing something that I particularly like to share that has been a great way to communicate with employees during this time, and I think it's very unique. Every Thursday, our CEO has an hour-long WebEx session called Coffee with Coffin. Don Coffin is his name, and it allows our employees to get on the phone or, on the WebEx in a way that's kind of a town hall style meeting, and ask him questions that are on their heart and minds, right? About pandemic response, how's business performance doing during this time? Really critical questions like, has he let his wife cut his hair during pandemic? So they're having some fun with it too. But what that's allowed us to do, in addition to give them a forum to ask questions, it's allowed us to release a little bit of information about this return to the workplace a bit at a time, so it's not all overwhelming and coming at them all at once.
Very good, thank you. Let's go to Ryan next.
Yeah, thank you. So for Mid-American, it's been very much a build-up. Really over the last several weeks here, we focused on the health of our employees, a lot of emphasis around mental health in particular. One of our challenges shortly before the pandemic hit, we were scheduled to open a training center for excellence that we were very proud of. I'm kind of off of Hickman Road between Waukee and Adel. And, unfortunately, the pandemic kind of puts a halt on those plans to actually get our employees in that facility engaged in learning. And so we said, what other opportunities are there to engage with people, as they're working from home, maybe they're not interacting with others and on topics on their mind. And so through mental health and through some of the other webinars that we've hosted around both the pandemic and some tips for success kind of in this unique work environment, we've sort of been leading up to it. We did make the announcement on Sunday that we were planning to re-enter our employees beginning June 1. Similar to what Amanda said, we've approached it from a number of different communication mechanisms. We have employees that sit in front of computers all day long, but we also have employees that are out in the field and seldom, if ever, check email. And so we're well aware that, we need a variety of different mechanisms to hit those employees. And so we're doing that here throughout this week and next week, really, trying to address their concerns, both from a health and wellness standpoint, but sometimes even down just to the individual facility level as well. Different buildings, different workspaces present different challenges. And so getting employees as comfortable as we can with re-entering the workplace, addressing their concerns before they actually come in the week of June 1 is a big area of focus for us.
Really great points, Ryan, when you have a mix of workers and where they are. Not everybody's in the office, so thank you. Marcy, your thoughts?
Yeah, so our president, Corey Harris, has been communicating with our employees via email almost every week. And a couple of weeks ago, he communicated with everyone that 4th of July would be the earliest that we would consider starting the process. That gives us quite a bit of time. And he also communicated that we would share more with employees in the latter part of June. Our expectation is probably getting start a plethora of communication, whether it's a checklist or the training of what online training that we'll want employees to go through when they return to work and what the new expectations are, things like that. We'll start communicating about 3 weeks before we start bringing the first group back into the office. And our expectation is when we do that, probably around 10 to 15% of our employees is what we want to start with in order to have plenty of space, get acclimated, kind of figure out what's working, if what we need to adjust to. The other piece that is really important at Wellmark is that we prepare our leaders so that they are able to be there for our team members. So I know part of the communication plan that I was just looking at this morning, in addition to figuring out the criteria, is bringing together the leaders, probably via Microsoft Team or a GoToMeeting or a WebEx of some kind, and walking through with leaders what we expect of them, our process for bringing people back into the office, and make sure that they have an opportunity to ask any and all questions so that they can be there for their team members. So beyond that, I would say we've set up a web page on our Wellmark intranet so that everything related to all things COVID is kind of what we talk about is housed there on the website. So employees know that they can log on at any time and access anything that we've talked about, as well as all of the references of the expert locations or the expert sources that we use to help us. So those are probably the variety of different ways that we've been communicating and will continue to communicate with our employees.
Very good. Beth, how about you?
Now it's my turn to say ditto. And it's, I think one of the things that's clear is it is not just one mode of communication, but it's that variety. Weekly emails dedicated to all things COVID-19, and then making sure when those emails go out, it's at that consistent kind of time frame so that a team member can know, all right, when I get this email on Monday, this is going to be related to COVID-19. So there's kind of that expectation, that consistency. And then like what Marcy had indicated as well, a space on our company intranet that is dedicated to all things COVID-19. And so that way, when an email goes out, when information goes out, if somebody might miss it, then that's that dedicated resource place that they can go to see, what did they miss? What's the newest update? The other thing that we're doing is our CEO, Scott Jean, has been doing weekly videos with, making sure that he's answering the questions. We've got team members throughout all 50 states, whether it's work from home or in our different branch locations, wondering, maybe how this might impact somebody in a different state differently than in Des Moines, and being able to ask those questions. Even asking some of those questions in terms of, hey, what is EMC thinking about long-term, potentially reductions, position eliminations? So we've really wanted to communicate that there's really no subject that is taboo. Please feel free to ask any questions, because if it's on your mind, weighing on your heart, then it's out there for other team members as well. And so then we want to make sure that we are honest, even if the answer is we don't know at this point in time, to be able to say that. So again, having those video chats out there, the communication to ask the questions, get the questions answered, and then empowering all of our people leaders, supervisors, managers, giving them the talking points, making sure that they're in the loop. So we've got that alignment between what is coming out from more of an executive or senior leadership perspective, and communicating that information to our frontline managers and supervisors. Again, making sure that they are empowered to answer those questions as well. And then with respect, again, kind of to reintegration, being able to have an umbrella that would be consistent in terms of what are the factors we're looking at across all our different locations, and then allowing for those unique situations, depending on where location might be, to look a little bit different, depending on what that population is within that area. If there are more folks who might be vulnerable, pre-existing conditions or different things like that, allowing some of those different nuances to be taken account into this kind of consistent umbrella of how we're approaching all things COVID-19. So just the variety of methods and mediums, and I don't think that you can over communicate, especially in this situation.
Very good, thank you. We do have a few questions coming in. I'm going to ask this first one from Laura. How do you engage workers who are at home on paid COVID leave? So is there a different means of engagement with those folks than those that are maintained on your existing payroll? And I'll open it up to any of you to respond to that.
I would just say very simply, it's not necessarily that we're changing a communication method, but we are being intentional about reaching out to them once they have been identified with a COVID positive case, and following up on their health and their well-being consistently.
And I would just reinforce what Amanda said, just making sure that and frankly, whether someone's out on any kind of paid leave, whatever the right reason is that they are not, and this is they're on paid leave, FMLA, anything like that, making sure that we are continuing to very proactively reach out and engage with that care for their well-being first and foremost.
Marcy or Ryan?
Yeah, I would agree that we haven't had too many situations so far of our employees that have been impacted directly with the coronavirus. But for those, just making sure that they know all of the resources that they have access to, and making sure that they know that our first and foremost priority is their well-being.
And I would just add as well, not so much just while they're out, but if and when they do re-enter the workplace, I think it's important to continue to check in with them. We have unfortunately had several cases of COVID-19 for employees entering the workplace. And, when they do come back, I think there's always that apprehension or fear, if there are colleagues that, kind of aware of what's going on, is this person safe to be around? And so, steps or efforts, that you can take in that area as they're reentering and once they have reentered, I think are always critical.
Very good, thank you. A second part to Laura's question, and it really speaks to what many of you mentioned, the culture of your organization and how that plays such a critical role in how your employees are feeling during this time. Her question is, how do you maintain and increase company culture and team bonding when we can't gather in groups? And I might just add on to that question, what have you learned and what might you do differently in the future as it relates to your corporate culture? And how about Marcy, let's start with you.
Sure. Culture is so important. And so we actually, a couple of things that we have that we did before and that we're continuing to emphasize, and then something new that we have put in place that we may very well likely continue or find a new iteration when we're all back in the office. So what we have continued to do is at Wellmark, we focus on strengths, and we actually have a platform called Standout that really helps leaders and employees communicate and check in on a weekly basis about work priorities, nuggets around strengths, how to use strengths, and what employees need from their leaders, and things that they love and they loathe about their week. We have a high utilization of that as an organization, and actually during this time of work from home, we've actually seen an uptick in leaders and employees using that platform to make sure that they're checking in on a regular basis, and that has really been helpful. We just released an engagement pulse in the last couple of weeks, and we're getting those results in. And so far, from what I've heard, is our engagement is the same or even higher than what it was before. So that's really good. The second, that one of the things that we introduced since we've been working from home is something called a superheroes page. So we've added a superheroes page on our intranet, and we encourage employees to share their gratitude, to share their pictures of their new coworkers, otherwise known as their favorite pets, what their new workstations look like at home, shout outs to each other, just things that emphasize that community and continuing to be there for each other. We have, I've heard of leaders hosting Friday night socials at 5 o'clock, and everybody jump on FaceTime or do that at 5 o'clock at the end of any work day, but just things that encourage that interaction and that check-in.
Okay. Feel free, Ryan, Beth, Amanda, you want to weigh in on that?
This is a fun question because I think we're all very across this panel proud of our cultures, and just to see people unite during a time like this, I think is really powerful. So at Bankers Trust, we've built a lot of trust over time, internally with our employees, externally with our communities and customers. And that trust basis is on strong values and a mission, of course, anchored in ethically doing things. And so during this time and in the return to work, our employees are rightfully expecting us to be the same and behave in the same ways. And I mentioned earlier, what I think will take forward even more so into the future of our organization are some of those connections that our employees have been able to have with leadership during this time. So those coffee with coffins I talked about before. We've also been doing leadership perspectives from the entire executive committee team released to our employees. We've been posting difference maker spotlights about all the things that our employees are doing for their communities and for one another during this time period, and distributing through our Live It system extra recognition points for leaders and for employees to give to one another. so that they can purchase items of their choice through all of this. So we've just been making those banks higher to reward people that are doing creative things to get the work done and for each other in this new remote work environment. And then the last thing I would just say is I believe it's human nature to rally around a cause or a purpose that's something bigger than ourselves. And for banking, we've been fortunate and at Bankers Trust to be a huge part of this payment protection program. And so we had a lot of our employees rally around that. In less than 2 weeks, we were able to impact 25,000 jobs, or said another way, 25,000 lives, right? So this is something team members across the organization got behind. We were able to do it because we had a strong culture, but I believe because we did it, our culture will be even stronger in the future.
Great.
That's neat.
You know, the one thing that I would just add is what comes through is, given this time that we're in, and in terms of culture, demonstrating that authenticity and vulnerability. And that has been a great way from a leadership perspective that our leaders have been able to do that. You know, somebody mentioned kind of that their hashtag coworker, whether it is a pet or maybe a child that happens to run onto the screen while you're doing a Zoom meeting. And one of the messages that we've tried to put out there with all of our team members is that this isn't just working from home right now. This actually is, you are working at home during a crisis. And so the expectation to really give grace and empathy and compassion for everybody. And so if you hear a dog barking, if somebody on your Zoom meeting really does have to step away for a second because they're also taking care of either a child or maybe they're a caregiver to a parent, you know, to really make sure that it's that holistic appreciation for what everybody is going through. And I know we've all heard this comment that not everybody's in the same boat. We might all be in the same storm, but we're in different boats. And it is impacting people very, very differently. And just to recognize that and appreciate that, and you know, be able to, again, to give that grace and empathy. And a few weeks into the work from home, we did a pulse survey just with regard to how are people feeling about their work environment? Are we communicating enough? And our scores from that type of a survey were actually much higher than our normal engagement scores. And so I think what we're trying to make sure we're doing is that we are keeping top of mind that need to be able to demonstrate vulnerability and authenticity in all that we do. And that's actually something that we're going to be trying to be very intentional about as we kind of return to what our better normal might be in the future.
Very good. Ryan, anything else?
No, great points. Nope.
Okay, very good. So when we talk about this kind of return to a better normal, and again, you've all referenced kind of the health and safety and the workspace. What new policies or procedures are you thinking about implementing around telework, your recruiting and hiring practices, your actual workplace environment, and so forth? Anything you'd like to share with the group on those policies and procedures?
Sure. With respect to the workplace environment at Mid-American, we have implemented temporal screening stations at all of our facilities. Employees have the option in most places to take their own temperature before coming into work, but you know, we're constantly asking employees to be diligent kind of around their health in general, and if they're not feeling well, then simply not to come into work. Within the workplace, I think I commented, you know, we have directional signage. We have really looked to socially distance employees. We several years ago made the decision to transition into an open floor plan environment, and while there's many benefits to it, you know, one of the obvious downsides is that at certain places it's much more difficult to maintain social distancing. And so we're working right now to reposition our employees and our teams to, you know, more adequately promote some of those practices. We did launch today a new remote work policy for Mid-American Energy. We've been kind of slow to embrace teleworking for a lot of different reasons, mainly that a good percentage of our workforce has to come in each and every day to perform their work. And so very excited to roll that policy out as an option for some of our employees as well. And then, finally, I think just from a policy standpoint, you're really looking to see how we can embrace technology to more effectively, do our work both now and into the future. A lot of exciting things on the horizon with respect to, virtual meetings and other things and kind of how we conduct work. And so looking to really integrate that both from a talent development and just employee communications perspective.
Amanda, Beth?
Go ahead, Amanda.
Okay. So I think just like the other panelists, we're doing things as we think about return, like safety screens and desk spacing and floor markers, availability of cleaning products, right? We're doing actually temperature taking and masks in our common areas for both employees and customers during our first phase of return to work. As far as teleworking goes, we were fortunate, you're always thankful in times like this for what you got ahead of that you didn't know you were getting ahead of. We had just released a remote work policy to give managers really good guidance for those eligible roles that were able to do remote work. And so, well, our first and foremost concern at Bankers Trust is getting the 400 people that we have out there working remotely to return safely through our tiered return plan. We know not only our company, but other organizations, this will change the way that we work in the future, right? So we know and have committed to our employees that we'll continue to reflect after we get that safe return, what we've learned from this and support an environment even more so at a higher level and rate of flexible work in the future. As far as hiring and recruiting goes, we're not under a hiring freeze. We don't have very many positions open as our turnover is traditionally low and even more so during this time. But we are cautiously recruiting, sometimes delaying start dates or onboarding. If we can onboard a new employee remotely, we'll do it, but we're really intentional on our communication and cultural assimilation so that it emulates the same kind of warmth we believe we deliver in person in that onboarding process. So the longer this goes, the more we've had to think about doing that more often. But we certainly are delaying where we're able to as well.
And I was just going to add that,
Yeah.
oh, that's okay. That one of the things that we're doing with, we've got an existing structure in terms of working from home and alternative work arrangements. We are in the midst of a pretty comprehensive survey that's both geared toward short-term and long-term with respect to work from home and future state. Because we want to use this really to help help us assess what our footprint might look like, and how that can allow us to be, again, more flexible, to be better stewards of our actual occupancy type of footprint, and being able to, assess what do we need to take a look at in terms of what might a reimbursement structure look like for people who work from home full-time, in terms of certain aspects that we would reimburse for in terms of setting up a workspace at home, your internet connection, things of that nature. So what are some of the additional factors that are kind of all inclusive to a probably a more long-term work from home type structure? So that survey is going on right now. Once that closes, we're looking at that to really help us engage in some future workforce planning, both at physical occupancy type of standpoint, as well as staffing and where our team members are going to be located. And it may be that we're able to cast that net a little bit differently given what that work from home might look like. So we might have folks from Des Moines who are able to be associated with a different branch, in North Carolina or out in Providence, or wherever that might be, to really help kind of with a talent pool and pipeline with a little bit more fluidity and I would say just flexibility across the board. And I think that's what we're seeing is that that's what folks want. So we're really taking a good hard look at that.
Marcy, anything else to add?
I would agree with what Amanda said earlier. Is when you're with a really smart group of great talent and very thoughtful employers, a lot gets covered in just a couple of answers. So I would say what I would add to that is I think we've always had a policy, or not a policy, practice of encouraging people to, if you don't feel good, don't come into the office. I think now it's more important, now it'll be more important than ever. And where in the past, when people had colds or they said, I don't feel good, but I don't feel horrible, they came into the office. I think now, my expectation, I'm hopeful that will be something that sustains, that people do stay home. And that while we don't have a work environment where we have that telework on a normal basis, this process has really helped us understand how we can be productive at home, so that where there needs to be like work-life integration and someone's not feeling the greatest, but they have the ability to stay home. If they don't feel well, they don't have to work. But if they are home and can be productive while not bringing germs into the workplace, I think we'll see that hopefully a little bit more often going into the future. The other things is we're working with our facilities team. They're a fantastic group of people. They've already installed some automatic door openings on some of the restrooms, those kind of common spaces. We're already adjusting our conference rooms and removing some of the chairs so that it really helps people make sure that they keep that physical distance. Starting to think about what we're going to recommend for one-on-ones and how to continue to encourage that leader-employee relationship. And if we're back in the office, how do we maximize that people interaction while still maintaining that physical distance? So really kind of a balancing act, but one that we believe very strongly with our culture that, and I know our employees believe this too, being in person, there's something that is very, very valuable. So how do we really find that balance? So I think those, I'm just looking at my cliff notes that my team was awesome in giving me before starting today. So I guess this is the one time that I would say, because you commented about recruiting, it is unique times. And so while done virtually, a huge shout out to you, Mary, for helping us recruit our latest executive who has said yes and will be joining our organization. So that part hasn't changed, is how awesome you and your colleagues and the Des Moines partnership has been in helping us recruit people to the Des Moines area. And that hasn't changed with this pandemic. So thank you.
Thank you. And dynamite candidate, so congratulations. Will be a great addition to our community at large, so thank you. So Marcy, you just really touched on something, and Ryan, I think you mentioned the temperature checks and so forth. We haven't talked about face masks. So any of you having any thought around your policies about face masks?
So for Mid-American, we are not requiring that employees wear face masks while in our workplace, but we are certainly encouraging it in situations where it's difficult to maintain social distancing. We have a large supply that we've acquired, and we are readily handing those out to employees upon request.
We're still evaluating whether or not we will require them. We will have face masks that we will provide, cloth face masks that we will provide to each of our team members when they return. Right now, where we're at is that we will strongly encourage employees to wear them. But depending on exactly when people start returning to the office, we'll really direct our position on the use of those.
And we're in the same boat as what Marcy indicated right now. We've got folks who are there at the office, making sure from that facilities perspective that things are still running and keeping the physical plant running. And those individuals are provided with the face masks, not mandated, but certainly want to make sure that from that comfort level, if they're not able to maintain social distancing, that they do have the requisite PPE available. And then, as what Marcy indicated, when we get to that point of the reintegration of a greater number of team members back into the physical office space, we will have the availability to provide face masks to team members if they choose to wear that, but assessing kind of when that might be, what the what might be a play within the community, and then we'll take a look, kind of at best practices and what kind of collectively the community and other places are doing.
And for us at Bankers Trust, right now, we have some employees that are in some of our office spaces and certainly in our branches, although our lobbies are closed down right now and we're just servicing customers through drive-through and appointment only. We have the available PPE for them, but we are just strongly recommending it. We are talking with our larger return to work, and in the first phase, we are going to require it for employees and customers during that phase. We have not commented on latter phases yet, and we might do something different. And I think with a lot of these things, you're hearing us talk about collectively looking across organizations, looking at the resources we mentioned at the beginning, because a lot of them are a moving target and these things change on a daily and a weekly basis, right? So even things we've looked at a high-risk checklist from the CDC, we've changed our version of reporting illnesses 4 or 5 times since this all began, right, with updates. So I think that's a big thing for other employers to know, is that we're all kind of struggling in that same boat. And we need to be kind of fluid in our response, keeping as up to date as we can on what's right for our cultures.
Very good. One last question from our audience. As we wind down almost another hour on Zoom, how are you avoiding Zoom burnout for yourselves and your team members?
That's a great question.
It is a
Great question. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura, for that question. I think we've been just trying to switch it up and use multiple different kinds of platforms, and then we can get excited about learning different types of technology so we don't get burnout on one, and using this as kind of a learning and development experiment. But I know on our teams, we have been doing virtual happy hours on Zoom, so we're trying to use them for both business and fun. So we mix it up a little bit. And mix up the times of days maybe that we gather, so we don't get in kind of these rote routines where we get frustrated with the fact that we're on Zoom as much. I think it's getting a little easier. We had a period of time, I think, as a team and an organization where the technology frustrations were worse than being on the Zoom calls themselves, but that's eased over time. So not a lot of Zoom burnout, but it's kind of in the same market of when we started as a culture using PowerPoint too often, and we said death by PowerPoint. We don't want death by Zoom either. So I think you got to mix it up. That's my best advice. Great point.
How about the rest of you?
So this is a bit of a vacation for me. At Mid-American, we don't use Zoom generally. In fact, we do very little with video conferencing altogether due to some cyber concerns. I'm looking to get something implemented here soon. So always nice when I can get on a different platform and chat with people.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a nice perspective.
Yeah, at Walmart, we don't use a lot of Zoom. It is, we use a lot of GoToMeetings and just conference calls. So at the times when I have asked my colleagues or my team members if they want to jump on a video, most of them have said, no, let's just talk. So I think we're giving people the grace of being at home and not, and being able to just join via voice. But no doubt Zoom has been more used than ever before.
Yeah, and we are definitely using Zoom a lot at EMC. In fact, it's kind of, that we're Zooming all day. But definitely trying to mix it up with just that good old conference call every once in a while, where it's kind of nice that you've got the voice and not have to worry about the backdrop and, you know, how messy is my office space, or, you know, is somebody going to come running in? But again, it's kind of the whole thing that life is still going on. And a lot of it, what we've encouraged our leaders to do is ask their teams, you know, how do you prefer to conduct your meetings? Is it a Zoom call? Is it a conference call? Is it through Microsoft Teams? You know, what is your preferred method of communication? And also times where if it's a Zoom meeting and it's a little bit larger, again, that grace of understanding, hey, somebody may not have their video on for a number of reasons. They may be trying to kind of manage and tutor their child, you know, whose school was cut short by the end of the year or doesn't have daycare or those types of issues. And so if they don't have their video on, don't just assume that they're checked out, you know, kind of give that understanding and grace as well. And then the same thing with the happy hours. I mean, we've done a couple of fun things in terms of touring the Des Moines Arts Center virtually on a happy hour, or, you know, trying to find out what our team members might like to explore through various types of virtual offerings, and do a happy hour around some of those things. So again, trying to mix it up a little bit and add the fun in as well, and you know, keep that balance, definitely.
Well, I'm certainly getting a lot of great suggestions here today from all of you. I had to share with Molly earlier today. I called her video on Teams, and it was just kind of an out of the blue call. And I said, I almost feel guilty, like I'm just kind of dropping into your home unannounced. I said I wouldn't hesitate at the office to pick up the phone and call you, but here, you know, it's kind of like, is it okay? Am I, you know, is this a good time to drop in at home? So it is a different world, but we just have a few minutes left, and I want to give you each an opportunity, just anything else that you want to share with the group before we close out today. And I did post in the chat the link to the DSM forward playbook. I hope everyone on the call will take a moment and access that. And I think, Amanda, you mentioned this is a fluid situation. The playbook is fluid, so we're constantly updating and adding new information as we get new guidelines and information from state, local, and federal resources. So thank you. Last comments.
From my perspective, I would just echo, you know, the value in collaborating. At least in our industry, there's been a lot of collaboration as we approach reentry. I think there's a lot of excellent playbooks out there. Depending on kind of where you're at in your different reentry stage, you know, I'd encourage you to go out there and certainly pull the best practices from all of those. You know, I know myself and others at Mid-American are always willing to help organizations out as well as you approach some of those questions. And so, you know, if you do feel like you're facing it alone, trust me, there's others going out there through it too. And, you know, I'd be happy to help out others with questions along the way.
You know, my final two comments would be with respect to all the amazing resources out there that I know I'm going to continue to avail myself of all those resources and the folks on this panel. So thank you. I've learned quite a bit today. The one thing I would say is what we are also trying to focus on in this time is also that mental health perspective, and just really trying to be very mindful that, you know, you've got the COVID-19 from that physical standpoint, and then also the mental toll that this is taking on our team members, on all of our stakeholders in our communities, and being mindful about that can manifest in different ways. And again, really making sure that we've got those relationships and those connections with our team members, so that we can dig a little bit deeper if something is presenting and we don't necessarily understand why, to make sure we can ask and kind of get at to have again, that kind of patience and grace and understanding with how this may impact people differently. And then to that end, that equity perspective of really making sure that we are understanding how our current policies and practices may land and impact our team members, and have that lens of equity, and ensuring that we can take a look at that, you know, something that we may think on its face may make sense, but then thinking about from an equitable perspective, are we really ensuring that that our policies and practices are really geared towards inclusivity, connection, equity, because really at the end of the day, we've got the best interests of our team members at heart, and then making sure that intent and impact line up that way too.
Thank you. Great point.
That's great points. I would just echo great comments, Beth and Ryan, that I think the listening and making sure that they're encouraging all of our employees to share their questions, their comments, their input, finding multiple avenues so that they can share, so that we can listen and make sure that their voices are heard, and that what we do going forward really reflects their needs, and making sure that we're there for our employees and for our members. And then just the collaboration. This has been really helpful. Thanks again, Mary, for hosting. I would also offer, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I know that we're talking with each of you on a regular basis on this call, so thank you, and look forward to the continued collaboration. Thanks for having us, Mary.
Thank you very much. And Amanda, you do get the last word.
Oh, hey, that never happens at my house, so I always appreciate the opportunities, and around most of the groups that I'm in. So thank you. And I would just echo, I am so fortunate again to be on a panel with so many great leaders in the organization. And one of my thoughts that I've been reflecting on a lot during this is leadership has shown up in so many places in our communities and in our companies, you know, in untraditionally non-leadership or manager titled positions, right? We're listening to our employees in a different way through a different time. And so if you have that aptitude and that capacity to be the leader during a time like this, I would just encourage any of our guests to do that, right? I've been saying a lot, kind of my guidepost has been that hopeful optimism balanced with the practical realism during this time, to be able to confront anything that may come at us and be flexible and use your resources. You're not in this alone. I think Ryan said that's really important to note. So please feel free to reach out to any of us with any questions that you have. I know this is a community. It's one of my favorite things about Des Moines, whether it is government or business or HR professionals. We don't keep the information close to the vest on things like this, where we think we can help one another out.
Well
Well,
said.
again, thank you. And again, on behalf of the partnership, thank you so much. We are very fortunate in this community to have so many great leaders, and particularly in our HR profession. I rely on all of you for many, many things, and I thank you so much for being here today, being willing to share, and being willing to open yourselves up to others contacting you. I would tell our audience that this is recorded and will be available on the partnership site very soon. And thank you all again. Have a great rest of the week and enjoy a long weekend. Thank you.